Hey everybody, how's it going? Today we're going to be going over and showing you how to install the Roadmaster Direct Connect base plate kit here on our 2017 Jeep Cherokee. So the base plate kit here is just going to be one of the several other things we're going to need to successfully flat tow our Cherokee here. Now, a list of some of those other things, such as the tow bar. Now, our particular tow bar comes with safety cables, but if yours doesn't, or the one you're looking at doesn't, you will need to pick up some of those as well because they are a required component. A few of the other things is going to be a braking system. A lot of states now require a vehicle over a certain weight to use a supplemental braking system, so more often than not, you're going to be required to use that in your state. We're also going to need a wiring kit to activate the taillights, and then possibly a few other smaller items. So this is what our base plate kit is going to look like and installed. And right off the bat, as you can see, almost all of it is going to be entirely hidden here behind our bumper. The only thing we're really going to see that's going to stick out much is going to be our safety chain tab. But aside from that, everything's pretty hidden, so you really do retain a factory-like appearance here. It's actually going to be using the cutout that our tow hook uses, so everything is going to look nice and in place here. We don't have anything sticking out. It's also going to have a black powder coated finish, so what does stick out is going to blend in well with the other plastic here on the vehicle. So this is what it's going to look like when we're driving around town. However, when we're ready to hook up to our RV here, we're going to take our removable arms here, simply insert them here into the base plate. Now it's super easy to do this. We're going to have this little spring-loaded pin here, which is going to line up with a notch on the inside of our base plate kit here. So make sure we insert it here in the right direction. You're going to push in to depress that pin, and you're just going to simply rotate it to lock it into place. You'll hear that nice audible click. Go ahead and tug on it, you know everything is nice and secure. So now that we have both of our arms in, we're ready to go. We're ready to hook up our tow bar here. So we'll go ahead and take one of the arms on our tow bars here. Now these next couple steps may vary a little bit depending on what tow bar you have, but the ends of them should look the same. So we'll just simply line everything up, insert our pin, line up our holes, and install the clip. We'll just repeat that same process on the other side. Then we'll go ahead and hook up our safety cable here. Then we may have some electrical connectors, possibly a breakaway for a breakaway system. But aside from that, we're pretty much done and we're ready to hit the road. So there's two different styles of the Roadmaster base plates for this vehicle. We have the Direct Connect style here, which is sort of the independent arm design. There's also another one known as the crossbar style, and that usually requires a fixed bar that goes between the two arms of our tow bar here. Now a lot of people don't like these. I definitely prefer the Direct Connect system that we have here. It's one less component, a little bit easier to set up each time. Now the Direct Connect is going to be compatible with a number of different tow bars. You can actually use the eTrailer tow bar that we sell here using a separate set of adapters. We also sell this with these adapters, but mostly we're going to be directly compatible with Roadmaster tow bars. But there are still options if you have Demco, Blue Ox, or eTrailer tow bars using adapters. So in regards to installation, I've installed quite a few different base plate kits, and I will say this Cherokee here is actually one of the easier ones. We're going to be using a cutout in the bumper as well as some frame mounting holes that are used for the factory tow hooks. So keep in mind we will need to remove those, but this is going to make for our installation to be a heck of a lot easier. We don't have to do any drilling into the vehicle, and we're not going to have to do much cutting either into the front bumper fascia because again, we're going to be utilizing those factory holes for the tow hooks. So now that we've gone over some of the features of this base plate kit here, let's go ahead, pull it into the shop, and we can show you guys how to install it at home. So the first step of our installation, we need to come to the front of the vehicle here, go ahead and open up your hood, and the first thing we're going to see is this large plastic panel here. Now this is going to be the radiator cover panel, and it needs to be removed. In order to do that, we're going to have several of these push pin fasteners located throughout this panel here. In order to remove them, it's pretty simple. You can take a flathead screwdriver or a trim panel tool, which is what we have here. Just go ahead and pry the center section up, and we should be able to remove it entirely. We'll just go ahead and repeat the same process throughout on our remaining fasteners. So now with all of our fasteners removed, we can go ahead and lift up on our panel here and set it aside. So now we're going to be removing the fascia from the core support here. We're going to have 3 bolts, one here, and there's actually one on the back side as well. We'll take a 10mm socket, we'll remove those now on both sides. So now we're going to come inside the wheel well here on either side, and we're going to have 3 screws we need to remove. We'll show you where those are now. So we have one at the top here, one sort of in the center, and then we have one down below. So we'll take an 8mm socket. We'll go ahead and remove these 3 now on both sides. So now we're going to come underneath the fascia here. We're going to have some bolts we need to remove down here as well. For starters, we're going to have several here attaching the bottom part of the fascia here to the core support. We'll need to remove those as well. Keep in mind, these bolts are going to be separate from the ones holding on our skid shield. So it looks like the washer here is getting trapped on our skid shield. So we actually need to go ahead and remove the skid shield now before we finish removing these bolts. Sometimes you can get them all out without removing the skid shield, but if the washers hang up, you will need to go ahead and remove the skid shield first. So that's what we'll do now. So in order to remove our skid shield here, we're going to get a 13mm socket. We're going to have a few bolts up at the front here. We're also going to have a couple at the rear as well. So now that we have our skid shield off, we can go ahead and finish removing our bolts here. So we're still underneath the fascia here, and if we come to either side here, we're going to see these little aluminum rivets. We have one on each side, and this is again attaching the bottom lip of the fascia to a panel here on the vehicle. We actually need to go ahead and drill these out. So we're going to take a 1/4" socket. We're just going to drill straight through the center of them. So now we're going to take a 1/4" drill. We're going to come to either side here. We're going to go ahead and drill out our aluminum rivet here. So now again, we need to come inside here to either side of our fender well. We need to go ahead and peel back that liner because we're going to have one final bolt, which we'll remove with a 10mm socket. Now this bolt is pretty much going to be pointed upward, so it's going to be back in this area here. It's going to be pointed straight up. We'll need a 10mm socket to remove that. So now we're ready to actually go ahead and remove the bumper fascia. A couple things we want to do beforehand. Number one, we want to find a place that's safe, that we can set it aside, that it won't be damaged. And number two, we're actually going to go ahead and clean off the surface here that the fascia detaches from the vehicle. And the reason we want to do that is we're going to come back with some painter's tape here and just tape up these lines here. That way when we're taking it off and putting it back on, we don't cause any scratches to the surface of our paint. So now we're ready to go ahead and remove the fascia here. We're going to start on either side here. I'm just going to grab the corner here and I'm just going to pull it out and away from the vehicle. So we just want to make sure that we take our time, work slowly. We don't want to pull too far away from our connection points. We want to get as close to them as possible so we don't stress crack the plastic. So we got most of the fascia off. We got to about this point here. We get around the pocket, the corner of our tail light or our headlights here, and where the hood shuts. So it's a little bit tricky to get this out, but basically we have this plastic piece here. And you can see these two little plastic tabs here. That's actually attached to a piece underneath this plastic. We need to go ahead and remove these out and clear these little tabs here. So you want to be careful not to damage any of the paint. But just to show you what's going on here, you can see what we're trying to do here. We need to pull outward on the fascia and clear those tabs. So here are those two little plastic tabs we were talking about. They go through that little flange there on our fascia. All I did was took a trim panel tool here. I just sort of pried that black plastic piece back so I could come out with the fascia. So before we remove our fascia entirely, we are going to have one little connector here. If you just reach your hand here in this little pocket, just a little tab on the outside, we should be able to pull that out. So now with our connector removed, we can go ahead and set our fascia aside. So now if we come behind the fascia here that we just removed, sort of looking on our frame here, we're going to see we have these aluminum support brackets. We need to go ahead and remove those now. We're going to have one nut here we need to remove with a 10mm socket. And then we're going to have a few more larger bolts here on the outside, which we'll remove with a 15mm socket. So now, behind the plates that we just removed, number one, we're going to have to go ahead and cut off this stud here using a cutoff wheel, or if you have a hacksaw, that'll work as well. And then we'll go ahead and flatten down this tab here with a hammer. Now over here on this side, we're actually on the driver's side here. We need to make sure that we're careful that we don't pierce the coolant reservoir, or the windshield wiper reservoir. And then we'll take our hammer here and we'll go ahead and flatten that tab. And then we'll just repeat this same process on the other side. So now we need to remove the tow hooks. We're going to have two bolts here at the bottom. We'll remove those both with a 16mm socket. So now in order to finish removing the tow hook, we're going to have a large nut on the back. You can see that here. We're going to take a crescent wrench, probably going to need a medium to a large sized crescent wrench. Go ahead and just stick that over the nut. And then if we actually just push the tow hook in a little bit, we should just be able to turn the tow hook to get it out completely. And once we get this one out, we'll just go ahead and repeat the same process on the other side. So now we're going to come to either side here where we removed our tow hooks from. We're going to take this little spacer plate that comes in our kit here, and we're going to be using some of the hardware that comes in our kit as well. First thing, we're going to take two 1/2-inch bolts, plop them down through the plate like so. And then we're going to take an M10 bolt here. We're going to place a split lock washer on with a flat washer. And then I'm going to go ahead and take some red Loctite. I'm going to put that on the end of our bolt here. And what we can do is go ahead and line up our two holes here with the two tow hook holes. We're going to be using the center one for this long bolt, or this far right one here for this long bolt over on this side. We're just going to go ahead and loosely thread that in now. And we'll be repeating the same process over on the other side. So now I'm going to use another one of our M10 bolts here just to go ahead and line up our hole, because then we're going to go ahead and snug up the fastener here. Go ahead and just repeat that same process on the other side. So now we're going to go ahead and tighten down our one bolt here, holding our plate to the toe loop weld nut in the frame here. So now we're going to grab our receiver brace here, make sure you have the right side. It's only going to go on one way, but you can sort of identify the bolts here on the flange and how they line up with these holes here on the vehicle. So we're going to take another one of our M10 bolts here along with the split lock washer and a flat washer. We're going to use this to secure the receiver brace to the vehicle here using this other spare hole we had for the tow hook loop. But again, as always, we want to make sure we put some red Loctite here on our bolt before we insert it. We're actually going to be lining up these two bolts here on the other side as well. So now that we have our M10 bolt in place, we're going to secure the two flanges to one another using the 1/2-inch hex bolts here. Place some red Loctite on there. Then we'll come back with our 1/2-inch split lock washer and our 1/2-inch nut. So now we'll come back and just go ahead and snug up our fasteners we just loosely installed. We'll use a 17mm socket for the 10mm bolt out here. And then for our 1/2-inch bolts on the inside here, we'll come back with a 19mm socket. And then for our 2 1/2-inch bolts on this side here, we'll need a 19mm socket and wrench. Now that we have our hardware snug, we'll come back with our torque wrench here. We'll torque everything down to spec. So now we're going to go ahead and re-secure our 3 factory bolts here, securing the flange on our base plate to the frame of our vehicle. So again, we're going to be using the factory bolts, but I'm going to go ahead, good practice, to put some Loctite on there. Now we'll come back with our impact here, 16mm socket. We'll snug them down, and we can torque them to spec. So now the final part, the last leg of our installation, we're actually going to make a couple cuts to the inside of our bumper fascia here. Don't worry, nothing's going to be visible from outside the vehicle. It's sort of all behind the scenes stuff. So if we come to the cutouts here for our tow hooks, this area here, you're going to see we have this little raised edge on the back side here. We're actually going to take that out. We don't need to take it all the way out, but we're going to take it all the way from this side, stop about right here. Then on this other side here, we're going to start about this inside pocket. We'll take that one out as well. And then on the outside here, you're going to have some more of this little molding here. We actually need to remove a couple inches of that. We'll show you that now. So here's what it pretty much looks like. We just went ahead and took a file here to clean up some of the rough edges once we got done cutting. But you can see here we've cut most of the flange out around here. We've also taken some out on the inside here. But that's pretty much what it'll look like. We'll just go ahead and repeat that same process on the other side. And that's going to do it today for our look and installation of the Roadmaster Direct Connect base plate kit here on our 2017 Jeep Cherokee.